The air inside Marcus's barbershop was thick with the smell of aftershave and old conversations. Rain tapped on the windows while the buzz of clippers filled the room. Saturday afternoons were always the same here: laughter, small talk, and the steady rhythm of routine. Until that day when everything changed. "Get your filthy hands off my chair," someone barked. The voice came from Derek Cole, tall, athletic, 19, brimming with the kind of arrogance that grows when no one ever tells you no. He was glaring at the man sitting in the chair. Ethan Brooks. Ethan was big. Broad shoulders, heavy frame, quiet presence. He wasn't loud, didn't fight for attention, didn't even lift his eyes from the magazine he was reading. That calm made Derek angrier. He stormed closer, his hand shooting out to grab Ethan's collar. "You deaf?" Derek hissed. "I said get out." When Ethan didn't move, Derek slapped him. The sharp crack cut through the room like thunder. Every voice in the shop vanished. 8 people froze. A teenager by the window lowered his phone. Mrs. Grant covered her mouth, whispering a prayer under her breath. No one moved. "Not one person. You're wasting space," Derek sneered. He grabbed Ethan's stomach, squeezing cruelly. "You see this? This isn't human. You're a walking health hazard." He laughed, spit on Ethan's magazine, and tossed it back at his chest. Still, Ethan didn't move. He didn't shout. Didn't strike back. His cheek turned red from the slap, but his breathing stayed slow and even. In through the nose, out through the mouth, measured, controlled. Marcus the barber stood frozen behind the chair. 26 years cutting hair, and he'd never seen someone take a hit like that without flinching. "Derek, that's enough," Marcus said quietly. But his voice trembled, and Derek smelled that fear like blood in the water. He turned toward Marcus, smirking. "I'm doing you a favor, old man. This dude's breaking your chairs just by sitting." Laughter bubbled from the corner where 2 of Derek's friends, Sam and Leo, stood. Nervous, uncertain laughter, but laughter all the same. Mr. Harvey, 73, who'd been coming to the shop since the Carter administration, didn't laugh. He sat by the window, arms folded, watching with the stillness of someone who's seen too many wrongs repeated over decades. He said nothing yet, but his eyes spoke volumes. Derek circled Ethan's chair like a predator sizing up its prey. "You know what your problem is," he said, voice dripping venom. "You've got no self-control. You probably eat pizza for breakfast and sleep standing up because you can't breathe lying down." He leaned in close, his breath hot and foul. "You don't belong here." Ethan's eyes rose to meet Derek's reflection in the mirror. One calm look, unshaken. Something passed between them that no one else could name. Something that made Derek's chest tighten for a brief second. Then it was gone. "Step back," Marcus warned, louder this time. "Why? He's not going anywhere." Derek jabbed Ethan's shoulder with a finger. "You gonna run, big man? To the buffet? Or you waiting for me to roll you out?" Sam laughed again, but Leo didn't. Leo looked uneasy. The room was still. Everyone afraid to move, afraid to speak. 3 people held their phones up, halfway to recording, but shame kept them from pressing the button. Derek yanked the haircut cape around Ethan's neck tight enough to choke. "Maybe I should finish this cut myself," he mocked. "Hand me those clippers, Marcus." Marcus took a step forward. "You're done here, Derek. Leave." "Or what? You'll call the cops?" Derek's grin widened. "Relax, man. I'm just talking, right, big guy?" Ethan finally spoke. "Are you finished?" His voice was low, calm, and deep, the kind that made the room feel smaller. "What?" Derek said, suddenly thrown. "I asked if you're finished." Derek blinked, his confidence flickering. "Nah, just getting started." "Then do what you need to do." The words landed heavy. They weren't defiant. They weren't scared. They were something else. Something cold. Something that made Derek hesitate for the first time all day. But pride is a stubborn thing. He puffed his chest and turned to the crowd. "Y'all hear that? Big man's giving me permission." No one responded. The silence was suffocating. Derek grabbed Ethan's wrist, lifted it, and scoffed. "Look at these fingers. Fat and useless. Can't even make a fist," but Marcus saw it, the truth hiding in plain sight. Those knuckles weren't swollen from fat. They were calloused, thick, shaped by years of impact, the kind of hands that had hit hard things and survived. Marcus's heart skipped. He recognized something. Muscle memory in the way Ethan's fingers flexed slowly, like a sleeping lion stretching before the hunt. Derek didn't notice. He was too busy performing. "You know what's sad?" he said. "You don't even try. You're not worth the effort. He grabbed a bottle of aftershave and dumped it over Ethan's head. The sharp burn made Ethan flinch, but his voice didn't rise. Marcus lunged forward, but Sam blocked him. "Easy, Marcus. It's just a joke." "This ain't no joke," muttered the teenage boy by the door. "Sit down, kid," Leo barked. The boy sat, fists clenched, face red with anger and helplessness. Then, from the corner, Mr. Harvey finally spoke. "Son," he said, voice slow and steady. "You're making a mistake." Derek turned, smirking. "Excuse me?" "A big one. What mistake?" Mr. Harvey smiled faintly, like a man who already knew the ending of this story. "You'll see. Soon enough." The confidence in that voice made Derek falter for half a breath, but his ego dragged him forward. He turned back to Ethan. Ethan wiped the aftershave from his eyes, calm as ever. "You done now?" "Yeah," Derek said, smirking. "Not worth my time," Ethan nodded slowly. "Good, then I have a question." "What?" "Can you be here next Saturday?" 2:00. The shop went silent again. "What are you talking about?" "I want to show you something," Ethan said. Marcus's heart pounded. He knew that tone. Not anger, not challenge, something far more dangerous. "Show me what?" Derek asked. "You'll see. But bring your friends. Bring whoever you want." Derek grinned, mistaking confidence for weakness. "Perfect. A whole week to hype it up. You want to fight, big man? Fine. But when I win, you apologize to me and everyone here." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "And if you're wrong about me?" Derek laughed. "Not possible." "Then it's a deal." They shook hands. Derek's grin cracked for just a second when he felt the grip. Solid as iron, steady as stone. He yanked his hand back fast. "Deal," Ethan said quietly. As Derek stormed out, Marcus looked at Ethan. "You don't have to do this." "I know." "Then why?" Ethan looked toward the trembling teenager in the corner. "Because some lessons," he said softly, "need witnesses." And when Ethan walked out into the gray afternoon, the whole shop stayed silent, each person feeling that they'd just witnessed the beginning of something far bigger than a fight. The news spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. By the time evening came, half the town had already heard that a fight was about to happen next Saturday inside Marcus's barbershop. People whispered about it at grocery stores, gas stations, even at the Sunday church picnic. Some said Ethan Brooks had finally lost his mind. Others said Derek Cole was about to get what was coming to him. And a few, like old Mr. Harvey, only smiled and said, "You'll see soon enough." Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of dread that followed him all week. Every time he swept hair from the floor or oiled his clippers, he kept replaying the scene in his mind, the slap, the stillness, and the look in Ethan's eyes. It wasn't rage. It was something older, deeper, something he couldn't name but didn't want to see again. Derek, meanwhile, was busy turning the challenge into an event. He bragged to everyone at the gym, posted about it online, and told his friends to come film the big showdown. He even gave it a name, Saturday Showdown, the Giant versus the Real Deal. He started running laps, lifting more, sparring with Leo to prepare. Every time he looked in the mirror, he imagined the crowd cheering his name. He thought he was preparing for a fight. What he didn't know was that he was walking straight into a lesson. Ethan stayed silent. He didn't talk about it with anyone except Marcus when he came in midweek for a quiet trim. Marcus tried one last time. "You really gonna do this, Ethan?" "I have to." "You don't owe that boy anything." "No," Ethan said softly. "But maybe I owe it to everyone watching." Saturday arrived with heavy clouds but no rain. The air outside the shop buzzed with tension. Cars lined both sides of the street. People leaned on fences, kids sat on bicycles waiting to see the action. Inside, Marcus stood behind his chair, trying to breathe steady while setting up the gloves, headgear, and rules sheet. Ethan arrived first, just before 1:30. He wore a plain gray sweatshirt and sweatpants. No flash, no brand logos, just quiet simplicity. He nodded to Marcus, who nodded back. "You sure about this?" "Absolutely." Ethan's voice was calm, his eyes focused. At exactly 2, Derek swaggered in, tank top and shorts, bouncing on his feet, grinning like he'd already won. His friends trailed behind, carrying their phones ready to stream. The crowd pressed closer, the air thick with curiosity and the scent of sweat. Marcus raised his voice. "All right, listen up. This is a controlled sparring match, not a street fight. Headgear, gloves, no punches above the shoulders. First to land 3 clean body shots wins, or first to quit. No exceptions, Derek smirked. He'll quit before I break a sweat. Ethan said nothing. He simply removed his sweatshirt. The shop went still. Underneath, his build told a story no one expected. He was big, yes, but not soft. The kind of solid weight that comes from strength beneath the surface. Every movement was smooth, balanced, practiced. His arms flexed naturally, not like a man showing off, but like someone who understood every inch of his body. For the first time, Derek's grin faltered. Marcus handed them both gloves. Derek grabbed his pair quickly, snapping them on like he'd done it 1,000 times. Ethan took his time, rolling his wrists, sliding the gloves over his hands with quiet precision. His fingers curved perfectly into place, no fumbling, no awkwardness. The teenage boy from last week whispered to his friend, "Look at the way he moves." What about it? That's not random. That's training. Outside, chants started rising. "Derek! Derek!" from the younger crowd. Phones lit up. Nearly 3,000 people were watching the live stream. Derek faced the camera, smiling wide. For everyone watching, remember, talk has consequences. He jabbed a thumb toward Ethan. He's about to learn. Ethan only checked his headgear, testing the strap, quiet as ever. Marcus looked at them both. "You ready?" "Crystal," Derek said, bouncing on his toes. "Ready," Ethan answered. Marcus raised his hand. "Touch gloves." Derek thrust his gloves forward fast, barely touching before pulling away. Ethan's touch was firm, deliberate. Their eyes met for half a heartbeat. Then Marcus dropped his hand. "Go." Derek came forward with speed, launching a jab straight at Ethan's chest. It sliced through empty air. Ethan had already shifted left by inches, the kind of movement that looked lazy until you realized how precise it was. Derek came again, 2 quick punches. Ethan stepped back, just out of reach. No rush, no panic, just perfect control of space. Stand still. Derek grunted through his mouthguard. Ethan didn't reply. He kept moving. Small steps, quiet steps, a dancer's rhythm with a fighter's intent. Derek swung harder. Hook, jab, hook again. Each strike missed by a hair. The crowd gasped, the sound of gloves cutting air sharp as a whip. 1 minute passed. Derek was already breathing heavier. Ethan's breathing hadn't changed. In through his nose, out through his mouth. Calm, even. 2 minutes in, Derek grew desperate. Sweat poured down his temples. He swung wildly, an overhand punch with everything he had. Ethan slipped under it so smoothly it looked effortless. He could have countered. He could have ended it, but he didn't. He stepped back, giving Derek space to recover. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Why isn't he hitting back?" Mr. Harvey answered quietly, "Because he doesn't need to." Nobody understood yet, but they were about to. Because what no one in that room knew was who Ethan Brooks used to be. Before the wait, before the silence, before this barbershop confrontation, Ethan had lived another life. 12 years earlier, he had been a professional fighter. Light heavyweight division, 40 wins, no losses. No draws. They called him Ethan the Wall Brooks. Not famous like world champions, but respected by anyone who stepped into a ring. Because when Ethan fought, he didn't just win. He dismantled. Methodical. Precise. Terrifying in his control. But his career ended not because of defeat, but because of heartbreak. One night, his 13-year-old son, Caleb, tried to take his own life after years of bullying for his weight. Ethan's entire world collapsed. The following months were agony. Hospital visits, therapy sessions, sleepless nights filled with guilt and prayers. He realized he couldn't keep teaching people how to fight while his own son was fighting to stay alive. So he walked away. From the ring, from fame, from everything. He traded trophies for bedtime talks, traded his diet plans for family dinners. He stopped counting calories and started counting laughter. Over 3 years, his body changed. He gained weight. His hands softened, but only on the surface. Underneath, the fighter still lived. He kept one reminder, a small silver medallion from his final fight. The night he decided that being a father mattered more than being a champion. Now standing in that barbershop, that same man everyone had mocked sat across from a boy who thought he was invincible, and the lesson was just beginning. Marcus glanced at the clock. 4 minutes had passed. Derek was drenched in sweat. His punches came slower, sloppier. Ethan hadn't been hit once, not once. The crowd began to shift. Whispers replaced laughter. People noticed the truth in Ethan's footwork, in the stillness between his movements. Marcus recognized it too. His heart started to race. He'd seen it before, years ago, on a poster that used to hang in his cousin's gym. He looked at Ethan again and felt his stomach drop. It couldn't be. But it was. Marcus's eyes widened as memory caught up to reality. That smooth precision, that effortless movement, the way Ethan's shoulders turned just enough to slip a blow. He had seen those moves before, years ago. Back when the local gym still had that faded poster of a younger fighter standing in victory under the words, Ethan the Wall Brooks, 40 wins, 0 losses. Marcus's hand started to tremble. He whispered to himself, "No way." Leo, watching from the side, noticed. "What's wrong?" Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Ethan. "That man, he's not just anyone. He's the Wall." The name spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. The teenagers started whispering. Someone opened their phone, typing fast. Another person gasped. Screens lit up all around the room. Videos loaded. Old fight highlights appeared. And then they saw it. A younger version of Ethan, leaner, faster, dismantling professional opponents with surgical precision. The same stance. The same calm breathing. The same eyes. "Oh my God," someone said. "It's him." Derek hadn't heard any of it. He was still swinging, still missing, trapped inside the rhythm of his own exhaustion. Then Leo shouted, "Derek, stop. You don't know who you're fighting." But Derek didn't stop. His pride was louder than their warnings. He charged again, wild and sloppy. Ethan shifted left, ducked, pivoted. The movement was so clean it looked like choreography. 5 minutes had passed. Derek's punches lost all strength. His arms dropped. His chest heaved. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. Ethan hadn't thrown a single strike. Then Derek's knees buckled. He fell forward, catching himself with trembling hands. He gasped for air, sweat pouring down his face. The room was silent except for the hum of the clippers still resting on Marcus's counter. Ethan stood over him, hands still raised. His breathing steady. No anger, no arrogance, just silence. He lowered his gloves slowly and extended a hand toward Derek. "Get up." Derek stared at that hand. Then, driven by shame and stubbornness, he slapped it away. "Don't touch me." He stayed on the floor, head bowed, body shaking. The silence in the barbershop felt heavy enough to crush glass. Marcus stepped forward. "That's enough, Derek." Derek looked up through tears. "Why, so you can all laugh at me?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "Because you need to understand who you just fought." Derek laughed bitterly. "I know who I fought. A fat man who got lucky." Marcus knelt beside him. "That's not luck. That's Ethan Brooks. The Wall, 40 wins. Never lost." The words hit Derek like a punch to the gut. "You're lying." Marcus stood and pointed to the phones around the room. "Ask anyone. Look." Phones turned toward him. Screens glowed with articles, fight records, highlight reels. Ethan's younger face filled the room. The crowd looked between the screen and the man standing silently in front of them, and realization spread like cold fire. Leo held up his phone. "He's right, Derek, it's him. Ranked number 7 in the world before he retired." Derek's face went pale. He looked at Ethan again, really looked, and finally saw it. The same eyes, the same bone structure beneath the weight. The truth was undeniable. I hit you," Derek whispered. His voice broke. "I slapped you." Mrs. Grant spoke up from the corner, her voice shaking. "No, son. You didn't just slap him. You slapped a man who deserved your respect from the start." Tears filled Derek's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan's voice was calm, steady. "Because it shouldn't have mattered." Derek blinked, confusion mixing with shame. "You could have killed me. You could have ended me with one punch." "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "Then why didn't you?" Ethan took off his gloves, setting them down gently. "Because destroying you wasn't the point." The crowd listened, every breath held. "I wasn't here to hurt you," Ethan said. "I was here to teach you something you'll never forget. You mocked me because of what you saw on the outside. But real strength doesn't need to prove itself." Derek's lips trembled. "I don't understand." Ethan took off his headgear, revealing a small silver medallion around his neck. His hand went to it gently. 3 years ago, he began, my son tried to take his life. He was 13, bullied every day because of his weight. Kids laughed at him, called him names, made him feel invisible. The shop went silent. Phones lowered. No one moved. He survived, Ethan said softly. Barely, but that night changed everything. I realized I couldn't keep living to win fights while my son was fighting just to stay alive. So I retired. I walked away from everything. I started gaining weight on purpose. I wanted him to see that bodies change, that worth doesn't come from muscles or trophies. Derek's face crumpled. I didn't know. I know you didn't, but ignorance doesn't erase the pain you cause. When you mocked me, poured aftershave on me, called me names, I saw my son. I saw every kid who ever felt small because someone decided their body made them less. Derek covered his face with his hands, sobbing. I'm sorry. Ethan's voice was steady but firm. You're not sorry yet. Not until you understand what you did. He stepped closer. You could have stopped at the first insult. You could have listened when Marcus told you enough. But you didn't. You kept going because it made you feel powerful. That's not power, Derek. That's weakness pretending to be strength. Marcus nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. He's right, son. You've been taught the wrong kind of strength. Mr. Harvey's voice rose from the corner, calm and strong. The man standing in front of you once fought 40 men and never lost a round. But his greatest fight wasn't in the ring. It was here today, choosing not to hurt you when he easily could have. Derek looked up at Ethan through blurred vision. Then what do I do now? Ethan extended his hand again. This time Derek took it. Ethan pulled him to his feet. You start by apologizing. Not to me, to them. Every person you disrespected by making cruelty a show. Derek turned slowly toward the crowd. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. I was wrong. About everything. I judged a man by his body. I made fun of him to make myself feel big. I hurt someone who deserved respect. I was wrong. He turned back to Ethan. I'm sorry. The room stayed quiet for a moment before Mr. Harvey started clapping. Others joined, not for entertainment, but out of respect. Ethan put a hand on Derek's shoulder. I accept your apology. But this isn't the end. Change isn't one speech. It's what you do after. Derek nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'll try. Ethan looked into his eyes. No, you'll do. Then he stepped back, removing the medallion from around his neck. The silver disc gleamed faintly under the shop's lights.
I won this the night I decided to stop fighting for fame.
But today I learned that peace can be harder than any opponent. You made me remember why I walked away. The crowd was silent again, but this time the silence was full of meaning. No one would forget this moment. Marcus wiped his eyes. I've cut your hair for years, Ethan. You never once told me who you were. Ethan smiled gently. You never needed to know. I wasn't that man anymore. You're still that man, Marcus said. Ethan shook his head. That man would have knocked Derek out in 30 seconds. This man taught him something he'll remember for life. Outside, the sky cleared. Sunlight spilled through the front windows. And inside Marcus's barbershop, the first lesson in real strength had just been taught. When Ethan stepped outside the barbershop, the crowd that had once been buzzing with noise parted for him in silence. The air felt heavy, as if the whole street was holding its breath. A few people clapped softly, others just stared. Phones that had been raised for entertainment were lowered in quiet shame. Ethan didn't look at them. He just walked toward his old truck, head bowed, gloves still in hand. As he reached for the door, he heard Marcus call after him. Ethan, he turned. Marcus's face was pale but full of pride. You changed something in there today. Ethan gave a faint smile. I hope so. Then he got in, started the engine, and drove away. The drive home was quiet, just the sound of tires on wet pavement and the hum of the engine. The weight of what had happened pressed on him. Not victory, not relief, but sadness. Because for Derek to learn that lesson, he'd first had to believe cruelty was power. When he pulled into the driveway, his son, Caleb, was already waiting on the porch. He ran down the steps barefoot, worry written all over his face. Dad, are you okay? Did he hurt you? Ethan stepped out of the truck and opened his arms. Caleb rushed in, hugging him tightly. I'm fine, son. Not a scratch. Caleb pulled back, searching his father's face. What happened? Ethan smiled softly. Not much, I moved. He got tired. Caleb blinked, surprised. He didn't hit you? Not once? Ethan shook his head. Not once. Caleb stared at him like he was seeing magic. 5 minutes and not one punch? Not one. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. Because sometimes the best way to win is not to fight at all. Inside, the smell of home filled the air. Fresh coffee, candles, the faint hint of cinnamon from the kitchen. His wife, Lena, stood at the counter, still in her work clothes. She turned the moment she heard the door. When she saw him, her body relaxed and tears filled her eyes. She walked straight to him, grabbed his face in both hands, and kissed his forehead. "Don't ever do that again," he smiled faintly. "I won't need to." She looked at him with that same steady gaze that had anchored him through every storm. "Did it work?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "He learned." He apologized. In front of everyone, Caleb's eyes widened. "For real?" "For real," Ethan said. And he meant it. They sat together at the kitchen table. The house felt smaller than usual, like the weight of the day had filled every corner. Lena poured tea, her hands trembling just slightly. "How do you feel?" she asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Sad." Lena frowned. "Sad? Why?" "Because it took all that for him to see me as human." He stared into his cup. "Sad that people still need proof before they give respect." Caleb's voice broke the silence. "But you showed him, right?" Ethan looked at him. "I did. But the real victory isn't what happened today. It's what he does next." Lena nodded slowly. "You think he'll change?" Ethan shrugged. "We'll find out. He's coming here Tuesday. I invited him." Caleb's eyes widened. "Here, to our house?" Ethan nodded. "He said he wants to make things right." "I told him the best way to do that is to meet you. To see that words don't just hurt in the moment, they echo." Caleb looked nervous but didn't argue. "Okay, I trust you." That night the house fell quiet. Lena went to bed early. Caleb stayed up reading on the couch. Ethan sat by the window staring at the streetlights outside. Near midnight his phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Marcus, the video's already at 200,000 views. People are calling you a hero." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "Ethan, I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who made a choice." He put the phone down and walked quietly to Caleb's room. The boy was asleep, breathing steady, safe. Ethan stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the doorframe, remembering every night he thought he might lose his son forever. Now, seeing him alive, healing, smiling again, that was victory. Not the fight, not the applause, not the headlines. This. He touched the silver medallion around his neck, whispering to himself, 40 fights, 40 wins. But this one, this is number 41. It was the hardest win of his life. The quietest. The one no one would ever put on a poster. But it was the one that mattered most. By morning, his story was everywhere. Local blogs, sports forums, parenting groups, anti-bullying pages, all talking about the undefeated fighter who gained weight to teach his son about worth. Journalists called. Reporters emailed. TV producers begged for interviews. Ethan turned them all down. He wasn't interested in being famous again. He just wanted peace. But the world didn't let go easily. People drove by the shop just to take pictures. Students shared clips of the confrontation with captions like, "Real strength looks like this." And in schools across town, teachers started using his story in assemblies about respect. For the first time in years, Ethan's name was trending, but for something that had nothing to do with violence. And somewhere in the noise, Derek Cole was learning to live differently too. He deleted every video he'd ever posted mocking someone. He went back to the shop, not to fight but to help clean up after hours. He even sent Marcus a message asking if he could volunteer at the rec center. When he showed up that first day, one of the kids, a chubby boy about 12, looked nervous. Derek smiled at him. "Don't worry, man. Nobody's messing with you here." That was the start of something new. In just a week, everything had changed. A fight that never happened had turned into a movement that couldn't be stopped. And Ethan, sitting at his kitchen table drinking his morning coffee, had no idea that his lesson in restraint was already reaching places far beyond his small town. But for him, the only thing that mattered was what would happen on Tuesday evening, because that was the day Derek would walk into his home, not as an enemy, but as a test of whether people can truly change. Tuesday came with a gray sky and the smell of rain that never quite fell. The kind of day that felt quiet before something important. Ethan had been up since dawn, pacing the house while trying not to let it show. Lena noticed anyway. She always did. She put a hand on his arm. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready." Ethan shook his head. "He's coming no matter what. Better he walks into a home that shows him what grace looks like." Caleb sat at the dining table pretending to scroll on his phone, but his leg bounced under the chair. "Dad, what if I say the wrong thing?" There's no wrong thing, Ethan said. Just be honest. That's all people really need. At 5:55, a car pulled into the driveway. Derek stepped out holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a folded envelope in the other. His friends Leo and Sam were with him, both dressed neatly, both wearing faces that didn't quite know whether to expect forgiveness or judgment. Lena opened the door before they could knock. Her eyes, calm but sharp, met Derek's. "You must be Derek." "Yes, ma'am." He held out the flowers. "For you. And this letter for your son." His hand shook slightly. Lena took both. "Come in. But understand something, this is our home. If you bring anything less than respect, I'll show you the door myself." Derek swallowed hard. "Understood, ma'am, completely." They stepped into the living room. The smell of lemon polish and coffee filled the air. Family photos lined the wall, pictures of Caleb smiling beside his parents, a framed drawing of their dog that had died years ago. It wasn't a grand house, but it was full of warmth. Caleb was on the couch, shoulders stiff. Ethan stood behind him, quiet, arms folded. Derek hesitated before speaking. "Hi, I'm Derek. I'm the one who hurt your dad." Caleb looked up, eyes steady. "I know, I saw everything." Derek nodded slowly. "Then you know I was wrong. Not just for what I did to him, but for being the kind of person who could do something like that." He took a breath. "I'm sorry, Caleb, not for the video. For what I represented." Caleb's hands fidgeted in his lap. He glanced at his father, who gave him a small nod. Then Caleb stood and extended his hand. "I'm Caleb." Derek shook it carefully, as if afraid to break something fragile. "Thank you for letting me come." They sat down. The first few minutes were awkward. Conversation came in short bursts, questions about school, about work, about the neighborhood. Then, like a crack in a dam, something shifted. Caleb mentioned a video game. Derek's eyes lit up instantly. "You play Warborn Legends?" Caleb nodded. "I've been stuck on level 12 for a week." Derek laughed, the tension breaking. "There's a side passage in the ruins. You gotta use the stealth route." "There's a side passage?" "Yeah, it's hidden behind a broken statue. Trust me." The two leaned over the coffee table, trading stories and strategies, and for the first time since Derek walked in, there was laughter, real laughter. Lena watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed but smiling. Ethan just sat back quiet, letting the sound fill the room. After dinner, as Lena cleared the plates, Caleb turned to Derek. His voice was small but steady. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why'd you do it?" "Why'd you pick on my dad?" Derek stared at his hands for a long moment. "Because I didn't know who I was without making someone else smaller. I thought if people laughed at me being cruel, it meant I mattered. It worked for 5 minutes. Then they moved on and I was nothing again." Caleb listened carefully. "That's how it feels to be bullied. You get laughed at, then forgotten. But it stays with you." Derek's eyes watered. "I know that now. Your dad could have crushed me and I would have deserved it, but he didn't. He showed me what real strength is." Caleb smiled faintly. "He says that all the time. Real strength is choosing peace." Derek nodded. "I believe it now." When it was time to leave, Derek stood by the door, awkward again. "Can I come back sometime?" "Not to apologize again, just to talk. Maybe learn something." Ethan smiled. "You're welcome anytime. But remember, change isn't one apology. It's 1,000 small choices that come after." "I'll make them," Derek said. "I promise." Over the next weeks, he did. He deleted the old videos that mocked people's bodies. He uploaded a new one instead, his apology unedited, eyes red, voice shaking. "I was wrong," he said to the camera. "Not because I got caught. Because I finally understood what my words can do." He lost followers. Thousands of them. But he didn't care. He joined the rec center tutoring program, helping middle school kids with homework. When he saw anyone being picked on, he stepped in. Not with fists, but with words. Calm, firm words. Leo and Sam followed his lead. They started calling people out when jokes went too far. They lost friends too, but none of them regretted it. The story of that barbershop spread faster than any of Derek's old videos ever had. Local news covered it. Then state outlets. Then national networks. Sports channels replayed the footage with headlines about redemption and restraint. Parenting magazines ran stories about the undefeated fighter who gained weight for his son. Requests for interviews poured in. Ethan refused them all. He told Lena, "The story isn't mine anymore. It's theirs now." Meanwhile, Caleb was changing too. He started volunteering at the same rec center. The first time he saw Derek there, helping a little boy who reminded him of himself, he smiled quietly and joined in. By the time 2 weeks had passed, the air in town felt different. People were kinder. Kids watched their words. Grown men held doors for strangers again, and at Marcus's barbershop things had returned to normal, or almost. The faded poster of Ethan the Wall Brooks now hung behind the main chair, freshly framed. Beneath it, Marcus had added a printed quote: "Real strength isn't being undefeated in 40 fights. It's choosing peace 41 times." When Ethan came in for his regular haircut, everyone in the shop stood. Someone started clapping, but he waved them down. "Please, I just need a haircut." Derek was there too, sweeping the floor, not for show but because he wanted to help. When he saw Ethan, he smiled. No bravado, no fear, just gratitude. "Hey, Mr. Brooks. Hey, Derek, how's life?" "Better, trying to be better every day." Ethan nodded. "That's what matters." He sat down in the chair. Marcus draped the cape around him and started trimming. The sound of clippers buzzed steady and familiar. Through the mirror, Ethan watched the room. The same walls, same mirrors, same faces. But everything was different now. Mrs. Grant chatted with her husband. The teenage boy who once froze in fear was joking with his friends. Mr. Harvey read his paper and Derek helped him carry his bag. It was the same barbershop, but it wasn't the same world. When Marcus finished, Ethan stood to pay. Derek walked over, wiping his hands. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That thing you said about peace being harder than fighting, did you really mean it?" Ethan smiled gently. "Every word. Fighting takes skill. Peace takes character. That's the strength that lasts." Derek nodded slowly. "I want that." "Then build it. One choice at a time." As Ethan walked toward the door, Derek called out, "Thank you for not giving up on me. For teaching me instead of destroying me." Ethan turned, smiling. "That's what strength looks like. Remember it. Pass it on." Outside, the late sun spilled across the street. Children played basketball on the corner. Cars rolled by. The world moved on as it always did. But inside Marcus's barbershop, a quiet truth remained. Champions walk among us, not always wearing belts or medals. Sometimes they wear old sweatshirts, carry extra weight, and choose peace when violence would be easier. That was the fight that mattered most. The one no one trained for. The one that changed everything. And for Ethan Brooks, that was the only fight worth winning. Night settled over the town like a quiet promise. The streets glowed with soft lamplight, the air cool and still. Ethan drove home slowly from the barbershop, his reflection faint in the window, his thoughts far away. It had been 2 weeks since that storm inside Marcus's shop, yet it felt like it had happened years ago. When he pulled into the driveway, he could see light coming from the living room window. Through the curtain, he caught a glimpse of Caleb sitting on the couch, playing the same video game he had talked about with Derek. The sound of laughter carried through the half-open window. Lena's laughter, warm and real. It was the kind of sound that told him life after everything had found its balance again. He stepped inside quietly. Lena looked up from the couch. "How was the shop?" "Peaceful," he said with a small smile. "And full." "People still talking about you?" she asked. He shrugged. "Maybe. But they're talking about kindness now too. That's better." She nodded, proud but cautious. "You did something big, Ethan, but I know it still weighs on you." He sat beside her, leaning back, staring at the ceiling. "It does. Every time I think about Derek, I don't feel victory. I feel hope. Hope he'll keep choosing the right thing even when nobody's watching." Caleb paused his game and looked over. "He will, Dad. I saw it in him." Ethan smiled faintly. "So did I." The house was quiet for a while, the kind of silence that comes when everything feels right again. But Ethan's mind was still awake. He walked out to the porch and looked up at the stars. That same sky he used to stare at after fights when adrenaline was fading and silence filled the locker room. Except this time, he wasn't thinking about punches or titles. He was thinking about the weight of mercy. Behind him, the door creaked open. Caleb joined him, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. "Can I sit?" "Always." Ethan wrapped an arm around him. They sat together in the soft night air. After a while, Caleb said, "When you fought him, you didn't hit him once." Ethan nodded. "That's right. How did you stop yourself?" "Because hitting him would have been easy. Forgiving him took work." Caleb rested his head against his father's shoulder. "I think what you did was harder than any fight you ever won." Ethan smiled. It was the only fight worth having. For a long time, they said nothing. The night hummed with crickets. The wind moved through the trees like a quiet breath. Then Ethan said softly, "You know, when I was your age, I thought being strong meant never backing down, never losing. But I've learned that strength isn't about standing tall. It's about knowing when to kneel. It's about seeing someone's pain, even when they hide it behind anger." Caleb's voice was small but certain. That's what Derek learned too. Yes, Ethan said, he did. And if he remembers that, he'll change the world in small ways every day. A car passed by, its headlights briefly sweeping over the porch, lighting the father and son in gold before fading away again. Inside the house, Lena watched them through the window, smiling softly, her eyes glistening. She'd seen the man she married step into a ring dozens of times, but tonight, watching him with their son, she saw something greater, a fighter who had finally found peace. Ethan stood, stretched, and looked back at the house. "Come on. It's late." Caleb followed, but before going inside, he turned to the sky one last time. "Dad, yes? When people ask me who my hero is, I'm going to say you." Ethan froze for a moment, his throat tightening. Then he turned and smiled. "Then I better keep earning it." That night, after everyone was asleep, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, the silver medallion in his hand. He ran his thumb over its surface, feeling the grooves and scratches left by years of fights. It had once been a symbol of everything he thought mattered. Now it was just a reminder of what truly did. He placed it on the table, took out a small piece of paper, and wrote a single line beneath it. "The greatest victories happen when no one is keeping score." Then he slid the medallion into an envelope and sealed it. On the front, he wrote to Caleb, "When you're ready." He left it there and went to bed. Weeks passed. The noise around the story faded, as noise always does. But the lesson stayed alive. In the barbershop, in the rec center, in the homes of people who had once watched cruelty like entertainment and now saw it differently. Derek kept showing up, sometimes to help at the shop, sometimes to visit Ethan and Caleb. He never came for attention. He came to learn. Each visit was quieter, humbler, and each time he left, he carried a little more understanding. Months later, the faded clip of that day resurfaced online, shared by someone who wrote, "This is what real strength looks like." It wasn't the slap or the fight people remembered. It was the moment Ethan extended his hand to the boy who'd hurt him. That moment became a symbol. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Parents showed it to their kids. It traveled far beyond the town, far beyond anyone who had been there to witness it firsthand. But for Ethan, it was never about the world. It was about one boy, his boy, who now smiled without shame and walked taller without fear. On a warm spring morning months later, Ethan sat on that same porch, coffee in hand, watching Caleb head off to school. The boy turned before reaching the sidewalk and called out, "Love you, Dad." Ethan grinned. "Love you more." The door behind him opened and Lena's voice carried softly, "Still thinking about that day?" "Every now and then." "And?" He looked out toward the quiet street. "And I realized something. The hardest thing I ever did wasn't walking away from the ring. It was walking away from who I used to be." Lena stepped beside him, slipping her hand into his. "And look who you became." He squeezed her hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "A man who finally understands what undefeated really means." The morning sun warmed his face, and for the first time in years, Ethan Brooks felt completely still inside. No noise, no fights left to win. Just peace, the kind that doesn't come from victory but from choosing the right thing when it costs the most. And somewhere deep in that stillness, he knew that if life offered him 40 more chances to fight, he would still choose peace. 41 times, 41 victories that no belt could ever measure. Because true champions don't need applause. They just need the courage to stay gentle in a world that rewards cruelty. And in that quiet house on Birchwood Avenue, a father, a son, and a family proved that peace can be the loudest kind of strength there is.